today's video, we're going to continue our 2019 NHL offseason plan series, and we're covering the Vegas Golden Knights. And that's coming up next. Welcome back to Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So if you're new to this series, we break this down into 3 segments. Segment 1, we're going to do an 18-19 season recap and look at any key statistics for the team and individual players. We're also going to discuss any significant changes that the team went through throughout the past season. In segment 2, we're going to take a look at our overall salary cap situation, as well as any pending RFA or UFA contracts that are expiring this year. And in segment 3, we're going to take a look at any potential changes this team should make to get better for next year. Now also, if you're new to this series, there will be a playlist up here on the YouTube cards. We've covered quite a few teams so far in this series, so if you're new to the series, check them out. And if the team you're looking for is not covered, it will be there very shortly, as we're very close to wrapping up this series. Now let's jump into the 18-19 season recap for the Vegas Golden Knights. So as we know, the Vegas Golden Knights in their second season had another solid year, putting up a record of 43, 32, and 7, finishing with 93 points in third place in the Pacific Division. They did have a first-round playoff loss to the San Jose Sharks. Of course, that was ending in controversial fashion when Cody Eakin was given a major penalty after what happened to Joe Pavelski. And, of course, the Sharks went on a crazy run with those power play goals and ended up winning that game in overtime. Obviously, they were later apologized to by the NHL, but it's unfortunate that it went down. But either way, the Vegas Golden Knights' run from last year going to the finals was unable to be duplicated, but it did go down here in dramatic fashion. Now, let's take a look at some of the key team statistics from the past season. Taking a look first at special teams, the power play was not real good this year, 16.8% for 28th best overall. The PK was decent, about league average, 80.9% for 14th best. Goals for were okay, 249 goals for 13th best, so nothing wrong about that. Goals against weren't too shabby as well, 230 goals against for 10th best overall. Now let's take a look at some of the key individual performances, including goaltending and some of their top scorers. Starting goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury had another solid year for Vegas, putting up a record of 35, 21, and 5, a .913 save percentage, and a 2.51 goals against average. Not quite as good as his first season, but still nothing to be upset about. He had a really solid year. Taking a look at their top scorers, they were led by Jonathan Marchessault with 59 points. William Karlsson was next up with 56 points. Riley Smith, who completes that line as well, had 53 points. Alex Tuch with 52. And of course, Mark Stone technically only had 18 points with Vegas, but if you look at his whole season, including his time spent in Ottawa, he technically was the leading scorer with 73 points, but only 18 came with Vegas. So I have him down below, but he certainly became a huge part of that team after being acquired. Now let's take a look at some of the major changes that happened to this team throughout the season. Now, when it comes to changes with the Vegas Golden Knights, things really kicked off here during training camp when they acquired Max Pacioretty from the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for Nick Suzuki, Thomas Tatar, and a second-round selection. Obviously, that was a huge pickup for them. They later proceeded to extend Pacioretty in a $7 million contract. They also claimed Valentin Zykov on waivers this year. They brought over Russian player Nikita Gusev, signed him to a contract. He's ready for a new deal here this summer already. Then, of course, the biggest deal of all, they acquired Mark Stone from the Ottawa Senators in exchange for Brandstrom, Lindbergh, and a second-round selection. Now let's take a look at segment 2, where we look at their cap situation as well as any pending UFAs and RFAs. As you may know, the Vegas Golden Knights' salary cap situation is a bit of a problem this year, and they have some tough decisions to make. Let's take a look at some of the players who need new contracts here first, though. Overall, in the RFA list, they got some big names. William Karlsson, who's been a big part of this team since the inception of the franchise, is a pending RFA. Of course, his first year with the club, he put up over 40 goals, had a tremendous year, and was only signed to a one-year deal last summer. So, of course, he is an RFA here yet again. Of course, they get Nikita Gusev, who I just mentioned, who they signed from the KHL. Of course, he needs a new deal already. Then you got Thomas Nosek and backup goalie Malcolm Subban. Taking a look at their list of UFAs, you've got Peary, Carpenter, Bellemare, and Englund. Now, looking at the overall salary cap situation here, they already have 19 contracts in place for next year for over $83 million, which gives them zero space. And they have all these players that either need to be signed or replaced. So that is a major issue for the Vegas Golden Knights. So obviously having zero cap space and all these contracts do is a bit of a big problem here for the Golden Knights. So now let's jump over to segment 3 to discuss how they handle that and what changes need to be made. Well, for starters, I think they're a prime target to have William Karlsson receive an offer sheet. So they very well might have to be cognizant of that and either trade him or sign him well ahead of July 1st. However, the problem with that is that they don't have any space to get him signed, so they need to make some other moves. Now, it's been reported that players like Colin Miller could be moved. We've seen reports that Cody Eakin, even Ryan Reeves possibly could be shed for salary cap purposes. I don't really think there's some of these guys that they don't really want to trade, but they do have to make some moves here. I mean, I would think William Karlsson's likely going to be around somewhere in that $5, $6, $7 million range. Hard to say exactly where he falls. He's had two very different seasons so far in Vegas, and I think it's probably going to be closer to what he was earning last year. But even to retain that salary or maybe give a little bit more certainly is going to be an issue here. If another team came along and offer sheeted him, say it's $6.5, $7 million, they very well might not have any choice but to let him accept that if he chooses to and take the compensation in return. Obviously, bringing in all these veterans like Max Pacioretty and Mark Stone, signing Paul Stastny last offseason has certainly eaten away at a lot of their salary cap space. And even though they're only 2 years into the franchise, they already have a salary cap problem. So certainly some salary needs to be shed here in order to get these guys under contract and get themselves a full roster for next year. Now, the good news is they still have a fair bit of prospects left who could fill out some of these roster spots on entry-level deals to kind of get down their overall space once they get some veteran players moved out. Now, the Golden Knights have youngster Cody Glass, who should be ready to jump into the NHL. We've got Nicholas Hag on defense, who should be ready as well. And they also have Nikita Gusev, and even though his one-year contract already expired, he's going to be making similar type money on a shorter-term deal while he proves himself here at the NHL. So those players likely, hopefully, can fill roster spots and take on some decent roles here. I think there's a pretty good possibility they'd like to retain all of their RFAs. When it comes to their UFAs, I think Bellemare and England, I think they'd like to retain both of them, but it's going to prove very difficult. From what I've heard so far, contract talks with a lot of these guys have been quiet. So anything that's been going on, they've kept kind of close to the vest here, which is not a big surprise. But the Vegas Golden Knights do need to make some trades. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who do they need to trade this summer to create the right space here to kind of get some of these guys back under contract? I also see a forward like Eric Howla, for example, who spent a lot of time injured last year, might be another candidate to go. Like I said, Cody Eakin, Colin Miller. They're going to have to shed a fair bit of these guys. I don't see them going after any big-time free agents because they have no space. I don't really see them making trades that bring in bigger names. They need to shed some salary, retain their core members here, and maybe add some youth into their lineup that they've drafted here over the past couple of years. Likely Malcolm Subban can come back as the backup goalie. I think he's done decent enough that they'd likely retain him on a shorter-term contract that's not going to cost them a whole lot. They still have Fleury under contract for a few more years, so that can continue to work. They've had a decent tandem here so far during their time in Vegas. And any trades Vegas makes, they're likely going to have to accept prospects or draft picks in return because they just can't really take on any salary right now. Of course, another big factor here as well is what's the salary cap actually going to be. Many have predicted it to be around $83 million, but what if it doesn't come in that high? What if it comes in a little bit less? I mean, we've had times before where it came in a little bit lower than what was predicted, and for most teams that's not a big deal, but when you're already tight to the cap or even over, even if it's $500,000 difference, that can make a huge difference on maybe shedding an extra contract as well. So let me know which players you think Vegas needs to trade in order to make the space necessary to keep some of the players they prefer to get under contract for next year. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So subscribe for more content just like this one, and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.